The South African economy has shed jobs once more, with the third quarter employment survey recording a year-on-year decline of 61,000 jobs. However, there has been an increase of 65,000 jobs when compared to the second quarter this year. And this is when the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic were harsher. There's generally a massive disjuncture in the data recorded by Stats SA when comparing year-on-year statistics and quarterly differentials. Joining us tonight is Matlapane Masupye, who is the Employment Statistics Director at Stats SA. Good evening, sir, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Perhaps let's just begin with the context, the economic context under which you're having to collect this data and really create a picture of what the employment situation in South Africa looks like right now.
Thank you so much, Madam. I think what is very important before we actually talk to the figures, we need to understand the methodology used this time around during COVID, because we had people who were working at home and we had people who were not working. So it was very difficult to collect the information. But let me firstly explain how the methodology works. And this is coming from ILO guidelines. And this has been we've been using. We are a payroll survey. Basically, we are measuring information from the payroll. So this time around, a person who is employed was defined in a case whereby that person is attached to an organization. By attachment to an organization, we mean he got some remuneration, because it was very difficult during COVID period. We had people who got payment from UIF, not from the organization. Those were labeled as unemployed. Only people who got payment from the organization were labeled as employed. I think we need to clarify that. Then we go back. We had the hardest lockdown, which was level 5, where there were no operation. Only trade part was working as essential. Then all these figures which we're going to talk about are actually coming from that level of hard lockdown improving as the economy was opened by the president. So for the September quarter, the survey showed that 9,581,000 people were employed. This is a quarterly increase of 75,000, but an annual decrease of 616,000. And if you break it down into part-time and full-time, from 9,581,000, 90.2 is coming from full-time and 2.8% is coming from part-time. By full-time, what are we referring to? We are referring to all those people who are working 40 hours or more in a week. We refer to them as full-time employees. And those who are working less than 40 hours in a week, we refer to them as part-time employees. And as far as movement is concerned between part-time and full-time, the results show that 47,000 full-time jobs were created compared to 28,000 from part-time. That is quarter-on-quarter movement. But when you look at year-on-year movement, full-time dropped by 525,000, while part-time dropped by 91,000. If we look at the industries which contributed to this increase of 75,000, I'm starting with trade, which is an increase of 31,000, and all are coming from full-time. Part-time registered 0, followed by community services with an increase of 26,000, 12,000 coming from full-time, and 14,000 coming from part-time. Then followed by construction, an increase of 24,000, 17,000 coming from full-time, 7,000 coming from part-time. Manufacturing, an increase of 8,000, 1,000 coming from full-time, 7,000 coming from part-time. Electricity registered no change. However, there were industries which registered a negative. The first one being business services with a drop of 7,000 and 5,000 coming from full-time, 2,000 coming from part-time. Followed by transport, a drop of 5,000, 7,000 coming from full-time and 2,000 coming from part-time. Hence, the 2,000 counteracted the 7,000. Hence, we have a drop of 5,000. And lastly, we have mining with a drop of 2,000, all coming from full-time. Looking at year-on-year, which is what you're interested in, all industries showed a drop. It is not surprising. Remember, 2020 was not normal compared to 2019. It was not normal. So when you compare the two, it's not like 2019 was a better year. We didn't have this shock. That is why now we see all the industries dropping. The first one being business services, a drop of 163,000, followed by trade, 162,000, manufacturing, 92,000, and lastly, electricity dropping by 2,000. All these industries dropped because 2020 is not a normal year compared to 2019. 2019, we never had COVID issues. We never had this shock. Hence, we see the difference in the two quarters. But the good news is when you look at the quarter-to-quarter comparison, we see that improvement because the economy was open, they increased, but some industries didn't perform like the transport and business services. Because even if the economy was open, some companies were still in the want. They were not operating. They were saying, hey, for now, we are still adjusting ourselves. We are not working, but we do have people, but we didn't work, we didn't pay them. And remember, according to our definition, a person is only employed if that person receives some remuneration. So if you didn't receive your remuneration, you are defined as unemployed. And this definition is coming, or is a guidance from ILO definitions.
Mr. Masupye, you're bringing me to the next point, because when I look at the recovery then of these 75,000 jobs for the third quarter, and we compare that with those that moved from being employed, at least according to the definition that you're looking at, who worked for companies and were receiving salaries, not those who were on the TERS benefit. Do you think that the numbers of those who have been on the TERS benefit, are you able to maybe reconcile how many of those would have come back into employment, whether full-time or part-time?
Unfortunately, the survey is not meant for that. We get information directly from the businesses, whereby they will indicate that I have this number of people employed and I paid this much. And then from that, we also tried to make it clear that people who got UIF, but they didn't get their salaries, they are not counted. Only those who got payment from the companies themselves, we have counted them in.
So effectively then, we are unable to tell at this point, in terms of those who lost their jobs, according to your definition, in the first and second quarter, how many of those would effectively be back in employment? Or is that just limited to the 75,000?
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell how many people who were unemployed came back based on that, because when we were collecting the questionnaires, there were still companies who were saying, we do have people, but we didn't work, we didn't pay them, so we have excluded them. So the best way is we need to look at this over time. It will give us a better picture. For now, it's still too early to tell the better story.
Effectively, when we look at the year-on-year numbers then, because I think that's when one really gets a sense of the picture that is emerging and the impact of what COVID-19 has been on the economy. How much trouble would you say we're in when you look at the declines?
I wouldn't say we are in a trouble situation. But remember, this is something beyond our control, and it's hit countrywide. So what we needed to do is to see how, as the president is opening the economy over time, whether there were improvement. For example, if you look at your trade, over time, trade was increasing all along, but because of this shock, it dropped. Community services was increasing. Because of this shock, it dropped. So the best way is we need to look at all these industries over time and see what is going to happen as soon as things normalizes.
Are you hopeful about just how the situation might change in the coming months? I don't know if you do forecasts. Well, you're a statistician, so of course you do forecasts, right? So what are your expectations in terms of what could well come over the next month or so? Sorry, over the next two quarterly labor surveys.
To be honest, I need to work within my limits, which is providing data. I cannot, we're not allowed to forecast. What we normally do, we wait for the period, we measure, and we put the data in on the public domain. I can't say the situation will improve or not. No, hence I'm saying we need to wait and look at the situation over time. It will tell us a better picture. But to say how much, no, that is not my function. Mine is just to measure and put the figures on the public domain.
All right. Let me thank you for your time tonight. That was Matlapane Masupye, who is the Employment Statistics Director at Stats SA.